My name is Victoria and Brennan. I'm 29 years old, and exactly 48 hours after my father's lawyer called to inform me I'd been completely removed from his will, I walked into his office and placed a single manila envelope on his mahogany desk. Inside were documents he never knew existed, records that would unravel everything he thought he knew about his perfect golden child son and his supposedly disappointing daughter. At precisely 2:17 p.m. on that Tuesday afternoon, I watched his face drain of all color as he opened that envelope, and I knew my father would never look at either of his children the same way again. The phone call had come on Sunday morning while I was finishing my coffee. "Miss Brennan, this is Howard Chen from Chen and Associates. I'm calling regarding your father's updated estate documents." His voice was professionally neutral, but I could hear the discomfort underneath. "Your father has made some changes. He wanted me to inform you that you've been removed as a beneficiary from his will, effective immediately." I sat there, steam still rising from my mug, feeling absolutely nothing. No shock. No devastation. Just a hollow sort of recognition, like finally seeing something you'd sensed in the shadows all along. "Did he say why?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "He mentioned something about teaching you the value of hard work and not expecting handouts," Mr. Chen replied carefully. "He believes you've become too dependent on the expectation of inheritance rather than building your own success." I almost laughed. My father, Douglas Brennan, who'd never worked a day past 5 p.m. in his entire life, who'd inherited his construction company from his own father and nearly bankrupted it twice before my grandfather's business partner saved it, this man was lecturing me about hard work. Before I explain what happened next, let me know where you're viewing from and hit subscribe if you've ever been the scapegoat in a family that refused to see the truth right in front of them. To really understand why that phone call was both devastating and completely unsurprising, you'd have to go back 7 years to when I was fresh out of business school. I'd graduated summa cum laude with a degree in accounting and corporate finance, turned down 3 job offers from prestigious firms, and made what my father called the biggest mistake of your life. I chose to work for a non-profit organization that provided financial literacy programs to underprivileged communities instead of joining Brennan Construction as their CFO. "You're throwing away your future," Dad had said that night at dinner, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "I built this company for you and your brother. Bradley's already proven himself invaluable in operations. I thought you'd handle the financial side, make this a true family legacy." But Bradley wasn't invaluable. Bradley was a disaster wrapped in expensive suits and my father's blind favoritism. He was 32 years old, 3 years my senior, and he'd been bleeding the company dry for years. I just couldn't prove it yet. Not then, anyway. My mother, Patricia, had sat silently through that dinner, as she always did when Dad made his pronouncements. She'd learned long ago that challenging Douglas Brennan was an exercise in futility. The pattern had been set since childhood. Bradley could do no wrong, and I could do nothing right. When Bradley barely graduated high school with a 2.1 GPA, it was because he's got street smarts, not book smarts. He'll be a natural businessman. When I graduated at the top of my class, it was, "Grades don't mean everything, Victoria. Let's see how you handle the real world." The real world, as it turned out, was where I thrived. My best friend, Simone Carter, who I'd met in grad school, saw what my family never did. "Your father's intimidated by you," she told me over wine one night, about 6 months after I'd started at the nonprofit. "You succeeded without his help, without his name opening doors. That terrifies him because it means he's not as important as he thinks he is." "Or he just loves Bradley more," I said, only half joking. "Maybe both things are true," Simone replied. "But Vic, you need to document everything. The way your dad talks about you versus Bradley, the company finances you've mentioned, something's off there. Protect yourself." I should have listened to her more carefully. Instead, I spent the next 3 years building programs, helping hundreds of families learn to budget, save, and invest. I was promoted twice. I won a national award for program innovation. My father attended exactly 0 of these achievement celebrations. But he never missed one of Bradley's quarterly reports to the company board, even when those reports were disasters poorly disguised with creative accounting. The first major crack in the family facade came at Thanksgiving 4 years ago. The whole extended family was there, aunts, uncles, cousins, gathered at my parents' sprawling home in Oakmont. Bradley arrived late, as usual, in a brand-new Porsche 911 that he claimed was a reward for closing the Riverside development deal. "That's a $120,000 car," I murmured to Simone, who'd come as my plus one. The Riverside deal netted the company maybe $80,000 in profit. The math doesn't work. But Dad was beaming, showing off Bradley's new toy to relatives like it was his own achievement. "That's my boy," he kept saying. "That's the Brennan work ethic paying off." Meanwhile, when Uncle George asked about my recent promotion to Director of Financial Education, Dad waved it off. "Oh, Victoria's doing her charity work. It's nice she has a hobby." A hobby. My career, my passion, my actual success, reduced to a hobby while Bradley's financially questionable lifestyle was celebrated. The second crack appeared at my father's 65th birthday party. I'd spent $2,400 on a custom-made watch engraved with the coordinates of the plot of land where he'd built his first house, a genuine, thoughtful gift. Bradley showed up empty-handed, gave Dad a hug, and said, "My gift is that new marketing strategy I'm implementing, Pops. That's worth more than anything money can buy." Dad teared up and hugged him tighter. My watch sat in its box, barely acknowledged. Later that night, I found it on a side table, still wrapped. He'd never even opened it fully to read the engraving. The breaking point came last Christmas, 9 months before the Will phone call. The entire family gathered again, and Bradley announced he was expanding the company into luxury residential developments. "High-end stuff," he said, gesturing expansively. "We're talking $3 million homes. I've already got investors lined up." I'd been keeping loose tabs on the company through public records and the occasional detail Mom let slip. Something about Bradley's announcement felt wrong. "What investors?" I asked. I didn't see any new capital listed in the company's last public filing. Bradley's face darkened. "Since when do you check our filings? You don't even work there." "Public records are public," I said calmly. "And I'm curious how you're funding a luxury development with the company's current debt-to-equity ratio." "This is exactly why I cut you out of the business," Dad interjected sharply. "You question everything, doubt your own brother's vision. Bradley's taking risks, showing initiative. All you do is push papers for poor people." The room went silent. Even my mother looked uncomfortable. Pushing papers for poor people. 7 years of helping families avoid foreclosure, teaching teenagers to break cycles of poverty, building something meaningful, reduced to an insult at a holiday dinner. I smiled tightly, excused myself, and left early. In my car, I called Simone. "I need your help," I said. "Something's wrong at my dad's company, and Bradley's at the center of it. Will you help me dig?" Simone, who worked as a forensic accountant for a major firm, didn't hesitate. "Send me everything you can access legally. Let's see what your golden boy brother is really up to." What we found over the next 8 months was staggering. Bradley wasn't just mismanaging the company, he was systematically looting it, using corporate credit cards for personal expenses, $47,000 over 2 years, inflating contractor invoices and pocketing the difference, estimated $180,000 over 3 years, creating phantom consulting fees paid to an LLC he secretly owned, $220,000 over 4 years. The luxury car, the designer clothes, the expensive apartment in the city, all funded through company theft disguised as legitimate business expenses. "This is wire fraud," Simone said, laying out the evidence on her dining table. "This is embezzlement. Your brother could go to prison for this." "My father will never believe it," I replied, staring at the spreadsheets. "He'd need to see it undeniably, irrefutably proven." "Then we make it undeniable," Simone said firmly. We document everything, build an airtight case, and wait for the right moment. That moment came sooner than expected with Mr. Chen's phone call about the will. My father hadn't just removed me as a beneficiary, he'd written a letter to be read at the will reading, explaining that I'd failed to live up to the Brennan legacy of entrepreneurial excellence and needed to learn the value of building something meaningful rather than living off charity work and inheritance expectations. The irony was almost poetic. While cutting me out for being allegedly dependent on inheritance, he was leaving everything to Bradley, who'd built nothing except an elaborate theft operation funded by our grandfather's actual hard work. I called Mr. Chen back on Monday morning. I need to schedule a meeting with my father. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., at his office. Can you be there as a witness? Miss Brennan, I'm not sure that's appropriate. Trust me, Mr. Chen, you'll want to be there for this, I said. You're about to see why my father's estate planning needs immediate revision. Tuesday afternoon arrived cold and gray, matching my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept, running through scenarios, anticipating my father's reactions. Simone had helped me prepare 2 folders, one with the complete financial evidence, and one with just enough to make my point without revealing everything immediately. Dad's office at Brennan Construction Headquarters was exactly as I remembered. Massive desk, leather chairs, walls covered with photos of projects and family. Mostly photos of Bradley. Mr. Chen arrived first, looking nervous and confused. Bradley showed up uninvited 5 minutes later, smirking. Heard you wanted a family meeting, Bradley said, dropping into a chair. Come to beg Dad to put you back in the will? I told him you would. Bradley, sit down and shut up, I said calmly, which surprised everyone including myself. I turned to my father, who sat behind his desk looking stern and unmoved. Dad, I brought you here because you need to see something before you finalize that will. There's nothing to discuss, Victoria, he said coldly. My decision is final. I'm leaving the company and my estate to Bradley because he's proven himself worthy of the Brennan legacy. You chose a different path. Did Bradley tell you how he's been funding his lifestyle? I asked, opening the first folder. Through his hard work and his generous salary, Dad shot back. Unlike some people, he actually contributes to the family business. I slid the first document across the desk. This is Bradley's corporate credit card statement from March 2019 through March 2021. Can you explain why the company paid $47,283 for charges at luxury retailers, high-end restaurants, and a golf resort in Scottsdale? Dad barely glanced at it. Business expenses, entertaining clients, building relationships. That's how deals get made, Victoria. Something you'd understand if you'd ever worked in the real world. Interesting, I said, sliding over another document. Because here's the client entertainment budget Bradley submitted for those same 2 years. It totals $12,000. Yet he spent $47,000. Where did the extra $35,000 go? Bradley shifted uncomfortably. Some expenses were last-minute emergencies. I didn't have time to get pre-approval for everything. Emergency golf trips? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Emergency designer suits? Let's move on. I produced another spreadsheet. This shows payments to Summit Consulting Group over the past 4 years. Total paid, $220,000. Can you tell me what services Summit provided? Dad looked at Bradley, who swallowed hard. They're business consultants. Marketing strategy, that kind of thing. Really? I pulled out another document. Because Summit Consulting Group is registered to your apartment address, Bradley. You're paying yourself consulting fees from the company. That's embezzlement. The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Mr. Chen leaned forward, suddenly very interested. Dad's face had gone pale, but his jaw was set stubbornly. That's absurd. Bradley would never. There's more, I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Inflated contractor invoices where Bradley pocketed the difference between the real cost and the reported cost. I have emails, bank records, and testimony from 2 contractors who were part of the scheme. The total amount Bradley has stolen from Brennan Construction over the past 4 years is $447,283. I let that number hang in the air. Nearly $500,000. Stolen by the golden child, the chosen heir, the son who could do no wrong. You're lying, Bradley said, but his voice cracked. You're making this up because you're jealous. You've always been jealous. Am I? I pulled out my phone and turned it toward him. Is this your signature on a lease agreement for a luxury condo in Seattle? The one you've been using for weekend getaways with your girlfriend? The one paid for through a shell company funded by Brennan Construction? Bradley lunged forward, trying to grab the phone, but I pulled it back quickly. Dad finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. This can't be true. This can't be real. It's all real, I said quietly. And it's all documented, verified, and legally actionable. Bradley hasn't been building your legacy, Dad. He's been destroying it. The company you inherited from Grandpa, the one you nearly lost twice and barely saved, Bradley's been systematically robbing it while you celebrated his every move and dismissed everything I accomplished. Mr. Chen cleared his throat. Mr. Brennan, if even half of this is accurate, you need to contact your corporate attorney immediately. This is serious criminal activity. Dad stared at the documents spread across his desk, his hands trembling slightly. For the first time in my life, I saw him look old and uncertain. Why? He asked, looking at Bradley. Why would you do this? Bradley's face had gone from pale to red. Because it was never enough, he shouted. Nothing was ever enough. You wanted me to be this perfect businessman, this legacy carrier, but I'm not. I never was. The company was failing under my management, so I took what I needed to maintain appearances. To be who you wanted me to be. So you stole from your own family? Dad's voice was hollow. You made it so easy, Bradley shot back. You never questioned anything I did. Every expense report, every investment claim, every decision, you just nodded and praised me. You were so desperate for me to be your perfect son that you never once actually looked at what I was doing. The truth of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. My father had been so invested in his narrative of Bradley as the golden child that he'd blinded himself to reality. And in that blindness, he'd pushed away the daughter who'd actually built something real, something honest. I'm done here, I said, standing up and gathering my folders. Mr. Chen has copies of everything. Do with it what you will. But Dad, I want you to know something. I looked directly at my father, seeing him clearly maybe for the first time. When you cut me out of your will to teach me a lesson about hard work and building my own success, you revealed something important. I already did that. I built a career I'm proud of, helped thousands of families, earned recognition in my field, all without your name, your money, or your approval. I never needed your inheritance. I just wanted your respect. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. Bradley needed your money because he never learned to survive without it. I didn't need it because you never gave it to me in the first place. So really, Dad, you didn't teach me anything I didn't already know. But I hope I taught you something today about choosing pride over truth. The next 72 hours were chaos. My phone exploded with calls and texts from family members who'd heard pieces of the story. My mother called 6 times in the first hour alone, crying and begging me to fix this somehow. Aunt Linda texted, "How could you do this to your brother? Family doesn't destroy family." Uncle George sent a more measured message, always knew something was off with Bradley's finances. "Good for you for bringing it to light." Bradley tried to call me 43 times over 3 days. I blocked his number after the first few voicemails progressed from defensive to threatening. "You've ruined my life," one message said. "I'll make sure everyone knows what a vindictive bitch you are. You couldn't stand that Dad loved me more, so you destroyed everything." But the most painful messages came from my father. The first arrived Tuesday evening, hours after our meeting. "We need to talk. This isn't over." Then Wednesday morning, "Mr. Chen says I need to consider pressing charges." "Is that really what you want? To send your brother to prison?" Then Wednesday night, "Your mother is devastated. She blames herself for not seeing it. Is this what you wanted? To tear this family apart?" Each message tried to reframe the situation, to make me the villain for exposing the truth rather than Bradley the villain for stealing nearly $500,000. Classic family scapegoating: blame the messenger, protect the golden child at all costs. Thursday afternoon, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I watched through the peephole as she stood in the hallway, looking older and smaller than I remembered. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "Mom, can I come in?" Her voice was subdued, tired. I stepped aside, and she entered slowly, taking in my modest but comfortable apartment. "You've made a nice home here," she said, sitting carefully on my couch. "I haven't visited before, have I?" "No," I replied simply. "You haven't." She nodded, accepting that truth. "Victoria, I need to understand why you did this. Why you collected all that evidence, waited for the right moment, and then detonated it all like a bomb." "Because Dad cut me out of his will to teach me a lesson I didn't need," I said, sitting across from her. "Because for 7 years, I've watched you all celebrate Bradley's success while dismissing mine. Because I was tired of being the scapegoat in a family that refused to see the truth." "We didn't know," Mom said weakly. "We didn't know what Bradley was doing." "You didn't want to know," I corrected gently. Every time I questioned Bradley's spending, his claims, his lifestyle, I was shut down. Called jealous, bitter, unsupportive. "The evidence was always there, Mom. You just chose not to look at it." She was quiet for a long moment, tears sliding down her face. "What happens now? Will you really let your father press charges against Bradley?" "That's not my decision," I said firmly. "That's Dad's decision as the head of the company. Bradley committed crimes. Real crimes with real consequences. I simply documented them." "He's your brother," she whispered. "And I'm your daughter," I replied. But that didn't stop Dad from cutting me out of his life over a lesson I didn't need to learn. Why should Bradley be protected from consequences when I never was? Mom didn't have an answer for that. She left shortly after, and I haven't heard from her since. The silence from my parents is heavy but not unexpected. They're trying to figure out how to navigate a truth that shatters their entire understanding of their family. 6 weeks after the confrontation, I received a certified letter from my father's attorney, not Mr. Chen, but the corporate attorney handling the Bradley situation. Bradley had been fired from Brennan Construction immediately and was facing both civil suits from the company and potential criminal charges for wire fraud and embezzlement. The company was working with prosecutors and considering a plea deal that would involve Bradley repaying the stolen funds and accepting a probation sentence instead of jail time. The letter also informed me that my father had revised his will. Again. This time, I was reinstated as a beneficiary, not of the company, which was being restructured and would likely be sold, but of his personal estate. Half to me, half to Bradley, to be held in trust pending restitution of stolen funds. There was a handwritten note attached in my father's distinctive scrawl. "I was wrong about many things. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. The daughter I dismissed built something real, while the son I celebrated built nothing but lies. I'm sorry it took me this long to understand what you tried to tell me for years, Dad." It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was acknowledgement, and that was more than I'd ever received from him before. 8 months later, I'm still at my nonprofit, recently promoted to VP of Program Development. We just launched a financial literacy program for small business owners that's being piloted in 12 cities. My father sent flowers when the announcement was made public, the first time he's ever acknowledged one of my professional achievements. Bradley is working at a car dealership, making minimum wage plus commission while slowly repaying his debt to the company. We don't speak. I've heard through relatives that he's in therapy, trying to understand why he felt so much pressure to maintain a false image that he resorted to crime. My parents and I have had dinner together twice. Stiff, awkward affairs where we talk about safe topics and avoid the past. They're trying, in their way, to rebuild something. I'm not sure if we'll ever have a real relationship, but at least now it's based on truth rather than the fantasy they preferred. Simone, my rock through all of this, was promoted to senior forensic accountant and jokes that I gave her the case study that landed her the position. You did the right thing, she tells me whenever I doubt myself. You stood up for yourself when no one else would. That takes courage. The truth is, I didn't expose Bradley's theft for revenge or to prove a point to my father. I did it because some lessons need to be taught, and sometimes the people who need to learn them most are the ones handing out judgment. My father wanted to teach me about hard work and building my own success. Instead, he learned that enabling someone you love doesn't help them, it destroys them. And rejecting someone because they don't fit your narrative doesn't diminish them, it just reveals your own blindness. Have you ever been the scapegoat in your family? Have you had to choose between exposing a painful truth and maintaining a comfortable lie? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by their family's approval. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the hardest moments and learning that sometimes walking away from toxicity is the most powerful choice you can make.